mental today because that's the vibe that we are all in together, and that's just fine.
Hmm.
It's the end of a long academic year, and we're beginning to think and gear up for what next year is going to look like. And remember to take a break in between. And the topic that I wanted to discuss with you today was a business planning model that Odette introduced to me. Odette Wallman, my business partner, who started off as my business coach, and I didn't let her go. Um, and the model is called Moscow. Must have, should have. Rosanna, want to have a guess?
Was it that can't live without?
That's right. Must
Yeah.
have, should have. Oh no, could have, and
Okay.
finally won't have.
Won't have. Okay.
Okay, so what you must have, what you should have, what you could have, and what you won't have. Now, this model has been really informative for me in shopping with my children, in explaining to my children what the difference between what you want and what you need are, and everything in between. Of course, it's important for business practices to know what tools you do need to have and what tools you might like to have. We very, very often meet with tutors who left the classroom, set up a business, and spent way too money too quickly, too much money too quickly. And that's because we think that we need great big systems and be ready to scale and don't want to drop a loop and don't want to let anyone down and all of those things. But actually, we create these great big, unwieldy, and expensive setups for ourselves when not necessarily are they. And I've been so guilty of that myself. So there's all of those things. And then there's from the point of view of the parent and the student, what things must be in place, what things should be in place. So there's a few different ways that we can take on this model. And I find it useful because of the way that it teaches us to reflect on our own thinking and practices. It's the metacognitive element that I find really, really interesting here, and the tension that we see in ourselves. It's sort of a process of adulting, the Moscow model. So let's first sort of explore what that means to us, and what our initial thoughts are about this, calling ourselves out and reflecting on what we must have, what we should have, what we could have, and what we won't have. Dee, what are your thoughts?
It's certainly going to be a helpful model to eliminate the I should be doing this because I'm seeing other people are doing it.
Oh, very good.
Um,
Really, really good.
when I started tutoring 4 years ago, I perceived I was nearing the end of my working life. I was in my late 50s, and I just needed something to fill the financial void that leaving my job had had created. Um, and then my circumstances changed because I met my current husband. We got married, and then I discovered actually I really love what I'm doing. Um, and I would see younger people in a whole range of different circumstances, people who'd been tutoring for a very long time, others who'd escaped the classroom at a young age and were now tutoring and were establishing these businesses. And I could see these things happening. And I was joining in with the sessions that Georgina was running on business and all the other stuff. And I was inundated with this feeling of, well, should I be doing this too? Is, and it panicked me, and that layered on top of the general imposter syndrome, which we all deal with as well. So to be able to step back um, with a model like this, as you know, I love structure, I love scaffolding. It's good for my students, it's good for us. So to then be able to hang it on a model like this, and to hang your feelings up against this,
Nice.
and use it as a mirror, it almost um, can be nothing but helpful. Won't stop me necessarily going through the perhaps I should be doing this, and then I have some rational thought about it, talk to a coach about it, and it all settles down again. But I go around this circuit quite a lot. I'm getting quite dizzy with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, as always, what I love from you is how honest and reflective you are. And I think that you just used you just mentioned your coach. And when I think about all the different opportunities that Qualified Tutor has presented to its members over the last year, let's say, and who's taken up which tools becomes really interesting. So the fact that you opted into that great big coaching course that is now really building out your skill set and sort of redefining your professional role, I think that becomes really interesting because it wasn't a must have or a should have or a could have for many of us, but for you it was.
Well,
And
I
so,
actually resisted it for
oh,
when I did I connected with Sam
yeah.
Moyne a year ago, and then he did the session in QT, and I did follow up with a call with him and one of his trainers, and all the while I was going, no, I don't have the headspace for this because of the commitment that it was going to make, because I would want to really commit 100% to it. And I said as much to one of the trainers in the discovery call I had with him. And, here we are almost at the end of the course, and it has completely transformed me in so many ways. So although I clearly had deep down there was this little thing saying this is important, and thankfully I listened to it, ignored all the other stuff, and here I am, and yeah, enjoying learning to be a coach and learning the value of being coached. Coaches need to be regularly coached as well. We all do. I think everybody should have a coach.
Well, that was where the concept of supervision came from. Um, and that would be really interesting to think about what that should is. And also that question mark that you dropped over all the shoulds that other people are doing. I should be doing this because I see the people around me are doing this. And how we're so good at aligning with each other in this online space, but we forget that we are different ages and different stages of life and have a different setup, and we must pass all of our decisions, especially when they take up resources, limited resources. We must pass them through a filter and work out what it is that we really want and what aligns with our values. Rosanna, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I really like this idea that you said earlier, which is that everybody's answer to this question is going to be different. And it goes back to Dee's point about, it's so easy to look at other people and be like, oh, they're doing this, maybe I should too. They look like they're doing really well. Like, I think there's that element of comparison that comes in, which isn't inherently bad, because I think especially if you're quite new to the business, it can be quite helpful to look at people who have been successful in whatever it is that you want to do, and then maybe try and model that a bit. But then, like you say, realize that everybody's goals are different, their setup is different, their priorities are different, and just acknowledge that and be fine with it, really. So I love the fact that it's a personal thing. I love the fact that we can acknowledge that and not decry it and be like, oh, everyone needs to do this. Because I've read so many, books and seen so many videos, and been approached by people on places like Instagram or LinkedIn saying like, I can grow your business from this to that. And it's like, yeah, but I don't want to do it your way. Like
Yeah.
they'll say, oh, you've got to do it this, you've got to be posting on Instagram every single day. And I'm like, that's just not me. Do you know what I mean? Like there's certain things that just make me feel uncomfortable. And I think even if I could get results doing it that way, I don't want to. So I think it's quite good to think about how you feel about things as well. I know that's a little bit more like wishy-washy than the Moscow model, but I still think it's quite helpful to be like, does this actually suit me personally?
I
Um,
actually think you've nailed it. I think that's the first must.
yeah, it's got to be like right for me as an individual. And because, like I say, there's stuff that I could probably do that would make me more money, that would make me maybe get more clients and stuff like that. But if it's stuff that's going to compromise my principles, and it's not about like not stepping out of my comfort zone, because I have had to do that. And I think that's a really good thing. It's just doing something that really feels a bit icky for me. Like, I don't know. I mean, we talk a lot in this group about like some of the issues that some people have with self-promotion and it feeling a bit yucky. So I get like sometimes you've got to get around that. But if it's in a way that really doesn't align with you and you feel like it's really kind of, yeah, just like not you, then I don't think you should have to do it personally. So I think any model that allows for you to do that kind of reflection and just learn a bit more about what makes you tick and what you want to do versus what you don't want to do, what's right for you versus what isn't right, and acknowledging that some things are right for others and not for you and vice versa, I think is, yeah, really, really helpful.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think the fact that you've held on to this sort of this respecting our own individuality is so in line with who we are as tutors, because you take every student as an individual. You have the luxury of being able to tailor your approach to every single student, and again, that's coming from this place of what are they trying to achieve, yeah, and therefore what do I need to bring for them. So it becomes really, really
Tailored.
yeah, tailored. And thank you for helping me with that word. I was just going to go off on a tangent. So I have this, I have noticed, and I think this idea comes from Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. We tend to think in shorthand, don't we? So we tend to think that there are a list of shoulds that every or there is a way that tutors need to look. There is a way that tutors need to be and deliver, right? I know what a tutor is and I know what a tutor looks like, and therefore, da da da, right? I know what a GCSE biology student looks like, and that's what they're supposed. But we know here that we're all about holding space for the individual, and we're all about celebrating all that variety. But that variety takes so much headspace to hold open to all of that, and it's almost like part of the commitment is building capacity in your thinking to allow for variety rather than just go to that shorthand and say everybody looks like this or this is what good looks like. Holding your mind open to more options is not so easy, and it actually takes its own discipline and muscle. Sue, welcome, my lovely. We are talking about the things in our lives, in our businesses, and in our tutoring practice that we must have, should have, could have, and won't have. It's the Moscow model.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're doing it in our general rambling way, which is to sort of explore what that looks like as people. And Rosanna and Dee have initially brought these ideas that firstly, it's really good to think that I don't have to have the same set of musts and coulds and shoulds as all the other people I see around me doing things in X way. So it gives us that freedom to be reflective and say, what's important to me? And then, by extension, what's important to my students. Pelham, would you like to contribute on this idea initially of what we must, should, could, and would have?
Yes, I like this model. It is very important that you have brought in discussion with us, because we are in different uh, levels of the how to do the business. It is very different here in Albania compared with UK or other European countries, and so uh, I rely on the principle that I have to use the experience of the other who are working and doing business, good examples, and also I rely on another, that it is my principle that I have to do to be involved in work, to be involved in business, irrespective of the fact that my colleagues, that my close friends are doing business or not. I have to work myself, because this is very good for ourselves, how to use the time in a valuable way, in a valuable way, and how we can contribute related to my age and to the other ages, that to contribute to the young generation, how they can push them forward to that they can think about such topics as we are discussing now, in order that they contribute to the next generation as well. And here, for example, in Albania, uh, I make a comparison between the students of the other countries that I am tutoring and the students in Albania. I observe or notice that in Albania, the students are not very much not concerned about uh, their education, their specialization. they are not are concerned about the science. No, the most the highest interest of them is how to leave Albania, to go abroad, because here are different conditions because of the corruptive system that is functioning and uh, reigning here in Albania. They want to go away. They want to leave Albania to go to find a job there in Germany, in UK, or in any other country, even in USA, uh, because here there is, for the time being, there is no future. So that is why I am noticing that the students that I am tutoring, they are not from Albania. They are from the other countries,
It's
from
really
UK,
interesting.
yeah, from Australia, and from Korea and China, but
Yeah.
not from Albania. And so I understand that the conditions, the economic conditions that are of a very low level here, and the way how is governed our country, this is a cause of their pessimism. And so they leave Albania. They
Mm.
want to go away. However, uh, I think I contribute in other way. So I work with tutoring other students, but also I present my results, my scientific researches on the different sites, internet sites, in order that they can see. Because, however, because IT means help very much today, that they can learn things, they can uh, understand what is happening around.
You're increasing
So
access.
that is the way how I am doing now. But
Very,
yeah, so that
very
is what,
powerful.
yeah, that is
Pelham,
what I
Pelham,
have to say. That
thank you, thank you.
whatever what they are doing or not doing, I do not rely on them. I rely on what the next generation needs.
Fascinating. So I think the first thing that you've told us in terms of must have
Yeah,
is it comes back to that idea of alignment with your values. And when you're talking about contributing, you're talking about inspiring the next generation and giving a hope and giving future. That for you is the definition of your values, and it's what you're bringing to students. It is, of course, important to notice that a must-have is different in different contexts, and
yeah,
students in Albania and students in Germany and in Australia will each have a different set of expectations. And of course, it is relevant that you're working with those students abroad as well for you. But the other thing that you mentioned right at the beginning there was about learning from other professional
yeah,
tutors.
yeah,
And working in context, I think, is something that we've really been able to create together as a community, because those of us who have worked as tutors alone and found it isolating, it's not only that there's no one to share a cup of tea with, it's also that I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know how other people are doing it. I don't know what normal looks like because I'm so isolated. I always use that example of a school where you hear in the corridor the other classrooms down the hall, and that gives you that sense of context of what it's supposed to look and sound like. And I think that being able to work alongside other tutors could be called, do you would call that could have? Would you call that a should have? Or possibly would you call it a must have? Rosanna, go for it.
Probably a should have, I
Go
would
on.
say. It's not technically a must have if we're being really strict about our definitions, because it is possible to do it without other tutors around, and but it's not very desirable, let's say. Um, so as much as sometimes I've got a bit of an issue with the word should, similar to reasons we outlined before, like what Dee said about feeling like, you should in line with what other people do. I think for professional development purposes and not feeling as isolated and yeah, kind of like getting over that, maybe like a little bit of imposter syndrome as well, because when you see that other tutors have similar experiences, struggles, whatever it might be, then you do feel less alone. So I think for me, yeah, I'd say it's more of a should have rather than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really helpful distinction. So, I talk about tutors being safe, skilled, and supported. And safe is, of course, in the must-have category. Skilled, I would suggest, is in the must-have category. And I struggle to demonstrate, but I think that we are doing it as a group. I believe that supported sits in must-have. And I believe it sits in must-have because otherwise the sustainability isn't there. And if the sustainability isn't there, then actually the expertise gets squandered. So, this example, we talk about, if you have a school full of newly qualified teachers, you don't have any experienced teachers in the classroom, everybody's development plateaus. In the same way, you need you need generations of tutors, you need expert tutors to be able to lead the profession. Otherwise, it's not, I firmly believe the profession is not sustainable. Your role as a tutor is not sustainable. So it's that sort of long-term performance. I would love for somebody to challenge me on this because I really, really want to talk it through. Sue, what are your thoughts?
Sorry, not going to challenge you. I completely agree. I think that when you start out, it feels as though you can manage without support. It feels, as though that's a bit of a luxury. As time goes by, I think it's very easy to get stuck in a rut. And we all sometimes have really tricky students, or more commonly, really tricky parents. And we need people to go to say, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to, or sometimes I don't know who to pass this on to.
That's really, really powerful, isn't it? That extra piece of referral of this is not my skill set. This is a signposting moment also becomes really interesting. What else is a must-have for you, Sue?
Trust.
Oh,
Trust. I need to know that my parents will actually trust that what I'm doing is right for their child, because sometimes it doesn't look that way. Sometimes the parents want to see a linear progression. They want it. So having that trust where I can say to parents, you're not going to see any improvement for a couple of weeks. We're starting something big. This needs a lot of groundwork. I think without trust, you can't work successfully.
beautiful.
And respect, by which I've looked after children quite a lot, quite a few of them, and some children with learning difficulties need to learn things other than the academic, and sometimes respect takes quite a lot of working to earn, but sometimes there comes a point when you have to say no. Do you know what? We've talked through this. You understand my boundaries. If you're going to keep pushing them, I'm not doing this. And I had a sort of 6'2", 16-year-old towering over me one day and swearing, and it was like, no, look, love, I would really like us to continue this. I think we're making progress, but I think you need to go away, cool off, and decide whether you're going to come back here next time in a different manner.
I think you've nailed it by talking about deal breakers. That's sort of the definition of a must-have, isn't it? If I don't have this, we cannot continue. And I think you've nailed it with trust there, and probably with feeling safe.
Yes.
A towering 6'2", 16-year-old who can't be trusted to behave well, it's a little bit scary.
Not at the time. I must be honest. I'm one of these people who live on adrenaline. I'm fine with scenes at the time. Afterwards, I think, when the door closes and then you do feel safe, that's when you think, oh, I didn't like that very much.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, are we talking about must-have for tutors?
Yes.
Okay, then I would say a must to have is your USP, so your unique selling point. What makes you a unique tutor that nobody else can replace you? Because I feel like tutoring is such a saturated market with so many brilliant teachers outside. So what is your USP that make you stand out for a certain subject or for a certain group of students? So I think that is something you must have in order to get more students. Yeah, and not just to make your tutoring business flourish.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. I think also it comes back to that idea that we've been discussing about values, because the USP will always be closely aligned with the values and being really, really clear about that. And I think Sue's given us a really useful tool for filtering out those must-haves, just simply by saying, what's deal breaker? What would I not tolerate? Or what can I not cope without? Dee, what are your thoughts?
Just coming back on USP, it's good to have a USP when the parents or whoever see you for the first time. But once you've been working with a child for a while, your USP is the fact that you have been working with that child for a while and you now know that child so well that you can now provide exactly what they need. So if they decide they want to go somewhere else, they've got to start all over again. So for me, I've always struggled with what is my USP right at the outset. But my USP for me is that once the students are with me, they're not want to go, they're just not going to want to go anywhere else because of the relationship that I've managed to establish with them.
In which case, relationship building is your USP.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a powerful point to say the more time and commitment and investment has gone into the tutoring, the more valuable it comes, the less likely they are to walk away. So let's think about shoulds. And let's think about, what Dee said right at the beginning, which is that we bombard ourselves with shoulds. What tool could we use? And I honestly don't have an answer. It's an open question. What tool could we use to filter out shoulds? What are the real shoulds? And what are not shoulds at all?
Again, I wonder if this sounds a little bit too wishy-washy, but I think the answer to all of these questions about what you must have, should have, etc., is it depends on your goals. So
Okay.
your should, if you're looking at it from the perspective of, oh, I'm just comparing because, I follow this person on Instagram or whatever, and they're doing something completely different, but it looks on the face of it like they're really successful, then that's probably not a real should, because you're just looking at the highlight reel of their life. And I think this applies to like personal things as well. So you might look and be like, oh my God, that person's like, tutoring from Dubai and they're having an amazing time. And then you're looking at it and then you're like, actually, would I even want to do that? Probably not. So like, even if I could do that, would I do it? I think is one of the questions that you can ask to actually identify real shoulds as opposed to fake shoulds, if that makes sense.
I totally hear the example. What's the question again?
How can you distinguish a real should from a fake should?
And what's your answer? What was the filter question?
I think it depends on what you want, basically. So you can look, and if you have this kind of like initial reaction of envy and you're like, oh, that person's doing this, then like question that and just sit with it for a moment and think, am I actually envious because I want the same outcome, or am I just envious because I don't have it currently and I'm just looking at it without really thinking about it, if that makes sense?
I think that's for sure true. On the QT community WhatsApp jobs board, all these glamorous jobs keep popping up. And last week it was building a Montessori early years in Barbados. Oh my gosh. I would drop everything and go to doing that in a second. That sounds like a dream job for me, except I have 5 children, and they would probably notice eventually. So although the job sounds like an awesome thing to do, it does not align with my values. It does not align with my bigger commitments and life goals. But I do think that your question is really powerful. Firstly, because maybe one of the shoulds is the way that we handle social media. How should we be, Sue? I can see that you had a response there. How should we be reacting to social media or interacting with?
I use social media. I am not a fan. I'm not a fan for the very reason Rosanna said about this snapshot of the best bits, and the times that I have seen parents that I have had in tears when they've claimed expected their children the next day posting pictures of half a dozen little darlings with perfectly baked cakes. And you just think, other people that, and funnily enough, I've been talking about this with two of my newest students, this fact that people lie, or they may not outright lie, but they present themselves in a way that is not honest, and how that impacts on the people that are having a hard time.
Yeah.
So two new students, no confidence at all, because everyone else gets it. Trying to explain, no, everyone else doesn't get it. Just some people are better at blagging than you are.
Really?
So I think, do you know, I'm an English person. My real issue with the curriculum, and I get quite ranty about the GCSE curriculum in particular, it's the one thing that we don't teach children is to filter information.
Tell us more.
Personally, I would scrap the the GCSE language paper. This just rehashing what they do in literature, but with an unseen text. And I would focus on the kind of communication they need to use: emails, job applications, CVs. But mostly I would be looking at bias and evaluating the reliability of texts.
I mean, there's got to be somebody who's writing that curriculum now because of AI. You know, I read the responses to the Foundations of Effective Tutoring course daily. So tutors are responding to these open-ended questions, and they're mostly gorgeous, but sometimes ChatGPT wrote them. And I feel sad for those people because they didn't get what they needed to get out of that question, because they didn't really do the thinking. So there's something about, reminding us to go through the process and not just jumpstart it by giving a prompt and letting the thing, but using AI as a resource, as we've discussed so many times before, is going to become a really interesting tool. And so maybe we could say something about curriculum then. Maybe we could say should have. I don't know if it's a must have. I'd say it's a should have a responsive curriculum that's fit for purpose. Go on.
I think we must have. I don't think that there's very much hope that we're going to in the near future. I trained quite late in life, so I trained under the old Labour curriculum. And one day in May, the course director came in and went, "Forget everything we've taught you about cross-curricular working, not going to happen. Just, you're going to have to wing it."
That's a shocking year to have been trained on.
It was interesting, but I very much hope whoever gets in the election actually does take a look and see whether the curriculum is fit for purpose and accessible for children.
So
I would go back to functional skills for a lot of children.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were just talking at the beginning of this meeting, Rosanna and Dee and I. I've just started writing a novel, and my novel is explaining to non-education professionals what the pushes and pulls and pressures in school feel like. So I'll be writing about a retiring head teacher and reflecting back on all the things that we see, that unless you're in there and you see the patterns and the relationships and the tensions, unless you're in there, you don't get it. And I will never have faith that a politician who takes a look will ever see those things. It is hopefully a thing that fiction can help with, but I really deeply feel that it should be the education professionals that are leading this profession, and not lay people. So we're talking about musts and we're talking about shoulds, and we've said in terms of shoulds so far. We said curriculum, and before that we said social media handling, and we said reflecting on or seeing through, having a critical mind and seeing through what are not real shoulds, what the lies are. So let's keep going, because I want to get all the way to the end so that we can circle right back again. What are the coulds?
For me, the coulds are the technological call whistles
Yeah.
and bells.
I agree with you. Tell me more.
You know, I'm just starting because I'm very mindful. Incidentally, I've written a novel about a little fat elderly primary teacher who discovers she's a superhero. So I think yours sounds much more grown up than mine.
Where is it? Where is it?
No, I haven't. I've just got it back from an editor. So I've got to be brave and try and find an agent.
Yes, you do.
That for me is, you know, all the things that I look confident about, that's the thing I'm not, because quite clearly the short fat elderly bit is primary teacher is me. So people that don't love the book don't love me.
But there will be plenty who do, and that's what life looks like.
But I think one of the things that I'm looking at the moment is producing videos to put on my website. So
Perfect example.
I don't know how that's going to work. I have borrowed a clamp for a phone. So there are lots of codes with lighting and microphones and stuff that if the first few look like they're going to work, I'll consider investing in.
Fantastic. And then I'm really, really curious, because when do you decide a could is worth the time and resources for you to invest in it? You know, when do you have capacity to consider a could even?
That's interesting, isn't it? Because it's the capacity. I think when you're looking at your coulds, you're thinking about, do I have the money for this? Yeah. Some of them are reasonable, some are really quite costly. And do I have the time?
Yeah.
So with doing videos, I'm sort of lucky. My youngest is in post-production for children's cartoons. So I know that I won't have to put a raw product out there. Okay. I can give it to him to tidy up a bit. But there's still quite a lot of time in thinking what topics would be worth producing videos for. And my gut feeling is we'll start with just some introductions to the subjects. Yeah, what are the ones that are likely to grab an audience, and then scripting.
Interesting.
So it's money and time, I think.
It's money and time. Roseanne, I'm coming to you, but I really want to hear from Jan on this one, because in developing Fun Class, you've looked at lots of coulds, and some of them got upgraded and some of them got rejected.
Yeah, so is your question specifically around how I choose could for Fun Class?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, then I would say it's mainly from two sources. Number one is the user feedback.
Nice.
And actually, Rosanna is one of the early users who is testing Fun Class. And yeah, she has given me amazing feedback, suggestions, what we could have. So I would say that's one source, how we have the ideas of could haves. And the other is the reference to other competitors or other similar apps, what other functions they have that could be very beneficial for us. So these are the two sources, how I get ideas of could haves. And then to your second question, how we decide whether it's a valuable could, then I would say if I verified the same request from other tutors who are also testing Fun Class, then I would say it's a valid request, and then we can start the development, etc. And then the other thing is just to compare if that's a feature that most of competitors have. Then I feel like that's something tutors are already used to too. If we don't have that, that might become a barrier for them to switch.
It's really interesting. So there's two things that I've just pulled out from what you're saying. The first is the process of taking ideas from outside and reflecting on them. So in our must-haves was very much that sort of internal, what are my values? What are my commitments? Whereas the could-haves tend to be things that are coming from outside, where you're reflecting on them and evaluating them. And the other thing that occurs to me is that it's actually could have that's the starting point for the whole process. It's almost that everything's coming in at could, and you're either moving it upwards towards should and must, or you're rejecting it and putting it in won't. And that, you know, Odette and I have been very, very aware over the last year or so, as we bring new resources to the tutoring community, you know, this platform, this tool, this opportunity, each thing gets filtered and different tutors take it in different ways. And then we have something called decision fatigue. And I think that's quite useful to consider in this conversation, where there gets a point where I can't actually take anything in on the could filter. I don't have headspace for it. So I can't even consider any more coulds. And the could door's shut. And my musts and my shoulds is where I'm going to dwell right now until I've rested enough to make some space to take on some new opportunities and ideas. That for me is what my mind, my processes do. Does that sound right to you? And therefore, as we start circling this whole conversation, well, sorry. Let's do the W. What won't you have?
I thought Rosanna wanted to say something.
You're so right, Jan. Thank you. Rosanna, go for it.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah, it's actually very similar to Jan's point about getting feedback as well, because going back to Sue's point about the videos, I think something like that is an amazing idea, but it's very hard, I think, in the moment to know the value it's going to have. Because if you look at YouTube channels, for example, when they start, a lot of them have like barely any subscribers, they barely get any comments, but when they keep uploading, it might take years, but they could grow that channel to the point where they're gaining revenue. So I think with something like that, you know, looking at the coulds, you've got to think about short versus long term as well. So
really
that's something to think about.
What's the value? What's the gain? What's the cost?
How long is it going to take to, because you could do something like videos, it's quite a big investment at the beginning, but long term it can be really, really lucrative, you know, useful, etc.
I think also it reminds me of the Seth Godin book, The Dip, that we looked at together, where he said, if you're going to do it, stick with it. And if you're not going to stick with it, don't do it. So there's a moment, isn't there, where Sue's going to say, ooh, these videos are awesome, or a pain in my neck. And then you'll decide which way they go. And that thing about, you know, commitment becomes one of the things. Commitment becomes one of the must-haves. I would love to sorry, again, W's. What won't we have? Go on, Dee.
Well, it was a could have that became a won't have, because I explored it a couple of times, and that's group work. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me, and I know from a business perspective, from a financial perspective, that it is an obvious place that I should be exploring, and I have dipped my toe in the water, and it's just not worked for me. And it occupies too much headspace, causes me too much stress, and so I've just had there's a payoff, and I've decided no, I've tried it, nope. So it was a could have, because I was hearing that I should be doing this, and I tried it, and I went to that fabulous webinar that Charlotte Watson and Samantha did, I think, on setting up groups, and it was great because it absolutely convinced me that I'd made the right decision not to go down that route. So
isn't that amazing?
It was fine.
I totally love what just happened there, because you absolutely showed us how the model works and where it dropped and why. And you can see why I called it adulting, can't you? Because we have this, you know, cute little FOMO, and then we realize, it's not for me, and I feel so clear about that now. And it sits in that won't pile in a really, really happy place. I wonder whether one day it can be checked, you know, dusted off and have.
Oh, I will. Yeah, I will. You know, as my skills
it.
change and everything else, then I may get to a point. I am potentially taking on from another tutor twin boys who want to be taught together. So who knows?
Yeah, so then there's that openness at the same time. Sue, go on. I can see that you've got something.
I'm with you, Dee. Although I do paired sessions, but I only do paired sessions if they are friends or siblings. So there's already that existing relationship, and that I find works. But I found I did groups of 6, and I just thought it was miserable, because actually it felt like I was back in the classroom, and that I wasn't having that sort of intense time with the children, which is the bit I like about tutoring.
Oh, we haven't discussed what we like in all of this. We've been very worthy and spoken about values, and we haven't actually spoken about our energy and what we like doing. What things are in your won't pile because you don't like doing them? I've got one. Facebook. I know I'm supposed to, but I can't. Helen, what do you have in your won't pile?
Well, I have to wait. I have to wait and to think about the previous situations. So, in order that I can move forward. For example, so you were discussing about the goods, but the goods, I think that there are many factors influencing the goods. The goods are influenced by finances, from they are influenced by accessibilities. Have I access or not to learn from the other experiences, and also from they are influenced by the level. For example, from my level of professionalism, was I able before to do in the time or not? Because so there are many factors that we can bring forth here.
So in a way, it becomes from a could to a could not. Yeah. I don't have this skill set.
Yeah, so it depends in many factors. But however, it is good to discuss because we have to move back. So to bring ourselves again to that situation of years ago, in order that we can change our mentality, we can change the way how we are working or doing business in order to move forward.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap up this conversation now, and I'm going to say that I feel that idea that you just said about that there's an openness in the way that you're talking here, that it sort of defines these conversations we have. They're very exploratory, and I find that very helpful. I'm going to ask you each to give me one key takeaway from the Moscow model, and I'm going to tell you that mine is that distinction that Dee made earlier between comfort zone and Moscow, right? There are things that we will grow into, because Moscow is not saying you can sit in a fixed mindset. It's saying be intentional about where you grow. So that was for me where Dee sort of brought in that distinction between what we're talking about today and stretching out of your comfort zone. Rosanna, what's your key takeaway?
I think the point about the shoulds is really interesting, to go back to Dee's point right at the beginning about, what's a real should and what's a fake should, and doing more to work on that, really, I think is, very useful.
Always. Pelham, what's your key takeaway?
I agree. What was said, I agree.
Fantastic. Sue?
I think it's the link between the must-haves and the won't-haves, really. I think you're right, it's a circle, and how closely linked they are.
Yeah, that's right. Lovely. Jan?
I would say it's about openness, as you said, to the could-haves, and then to really distinguish when it will become won't have or should have or even must have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for continually following me in this abstract ramble. I find them such a joy, these conversations, and there were so many key points that were touched on here. I hope that they continue to be useful for you. Qualified Tutor is, of course, raising standards in tutoring. We welcome you to participate in all of our events. World Tutors Day is coming up, 2nd of July. Lots and lots to find out about there. Look it up on our website, qualifiedtutor.org, or have a look online, where we are making way too much noise. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rosanna. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.